Hello, my name is Stephen Walther, and in this video I'm going to talk about controllers, controller actions, and controller action results. So let's start by talking about ASP.NET MVC controllers. What is a controller? Well, a controller is what's responsible for responding to a request. Any request you make against an ASP.NET MVC application is mapped over to a particular controller. A controller is really something that controls your interaction with an ASP.NET MVC application. Let's look at an example of a controller. You'll notice that I already have Visual Studio 2008 open in front of me right now, and I have a Visual Basic ASP.NET MVC application open in Solution Explorer. You'll notice that there's three folders here. I have a Models folder, a Views folder, and a Controllers folder. So that's the MVC and MVC. And I'm going to go ahead and add a new controller into the Controllers folder. So I'm just going to right-click, select the menu option Add, select New Item, and I'm going to go ahead and add in a MVC controller class. Now, all controllers have to have the special suffix on them, the special suffix controller. That's what marks them as a controller. So you have to leave controller in here. But I'm going to go ahead and name my controller the product controller. Click Add, and now I have a new controller. Now you do need to add your controllers into the controllers folder. Now, one thing to notice immediately is a controller is just a class. So notice this, in this case, is a Visual Basic class, but of course it could be a C# class or any other language that you're working with. The other thing to notice is it is a class that derives from the base MVC controller class. So the base class gives us some methods and properties for free, which we'll need to use some of those methods in a moment. And finally, notice that we get a function. We get a default function called index. The index function is an example of a controller action. A controller action is, what the actual method that gets invoked when you make a request against a controller. So the particular controller action that's called depends on what you type in your URL. Now, there are some requirements that a controller action has to satisfy. A controller action has to be a public function. In Visual Basic, functions are public by default, so we get that automatically. If this was private, it wouldn't work. A controller action also has to not be overloaded. You can't have overloaded versions of the same function. The other requirement is they can't be shared. It has to be an instance function. Other than that, you can use pretty much any function that you want as a controller action. Now, a controller action returns something called an action result. So each controller action and controller returns something called an action result. There are a number of different types of action results that controller action might return. The most common type, 90% of the time, you're going to be using a controller action to return something called a view result. Now, what's a view result? Well, a view result returns a view, and a view contains some, markup, some HTML markup, and some content that you want to send back to the browser. So let me show you an example of that. I'm switching back over here to my index action. I'm going to change it so it returns a view result. So I'm just going to say return view, and technically, view is a method of the base controller class, and this view method, what it does is it returns a view result. So it's just a method that returns a view result. And the way it works is it's going to return a view result that corresponds to the name of the controller action. So by default, it's going to return something called an index view. It's going to return an index view that's located in a subfolder that corresponds to the name of the controller. So to get all this to work, what I need to do is I need to go to my views folder. I need to expand that out. I need to add another subfolder into views. I'm going to right click and add a new folder, and I'm going to call it the product folder. Now, the reason I'm creating a product folder is I need a folder that corresponds to the name of my controller. So this is the product controller, and inside of that I'm now going to create a new view. So I selected add new item, and I'm going to go ahead and add a MVC view page. And the name of the view has to correspond to the controller action. So this has to be named index. It needs to correspond to the name of this controller action right here, which is named index. So I've now named this guy index.aspx, and I can type in any content that I want. I'm just going to say hello from index controller action. Now I'm going to go ahead and run this. And now when I run this, when the browser opens up, if I say /product/index, notice what I get back. I get back that particular view, hello from index controller action. Now, a view result is just, one example of an action result. There's a number of different types of action results that a controller action might return. For example, you might want to return something called a JSON result. JSON's useful if you're building an AJAX application. That will return, a JSON result back that you could use within the browser. You could also return something called a redirect to route result. What this does is it allows you to, say, redirect someone to another controller action, or even, a completely different URL. You can also return something called a content result. A content result allows you to send text back, or for that matter, you can create your custom action results. So you can create your own custom action result. For example, you might want to return an Excel spreadsheet file. You could do that by just creating your own action result. Let me show you an example of another action result that you can return from a controller action. Let's say that you want one controller action simply to redirect you to another controller action. Well, you can do that by calling a redirect to action method, by calling the redirect to action method within a controller. Let me show you how that works. I'm going to add in another controller action. I'm going to call it index2, and this controller action is going to return a redirect to action. Now, technically, redirect to action is going to return something called redirect to route result, and that will allow you to redirect to a particular action. I want this action to redirect me to the index action. So let's go ahead and try that out. I'm going to run this, and if I type into my browser, if I type in /product/index2, notice what happens. It sends me back to the first one. It sends me back to the index action and shows the view from the index action. So that successfully redirected me back to the right controller action. Now I can use a JSON result. I can return a JSON result from an action. I can also return a content result. Content result's interesting because what a content result does is that it returns text to the browser. So instead of returning, an HTML document, it returns text back to a browser. Now the interesting thing about the content result is it's kind of the default result if you don't specify a particular type of result. Now you can be explicit about using a content result. Let me go ahead and create another action on my controller, and I'll have it go ahead and return a content result. So I'm calling the content method of the base controller class, hello from index3, passing in a string. And what will happen here is this content method will return a content result, action result, and it'll take this string and send it back as text to the browser. So let me go ahead and run that. And now if I type into the browser /product/index3, you'll notice it says hello from index3. That's actually just text being sent back. You can see that if you right click and go to view source. Notice this isn't HTML, this is just a plain text file that the browser is grabbing and interpreting. Now the content result is interesting because it's the default result. So if I have a controller action that returns something that's not, like one of the standard, it's not a standard view result, or it's not a JSON result, what will happen is the MVC framework will take that controller action result, automatically call toString on it, and then wrap it up into a content result and send that back to the browser. For example, if I just return, datetime.now, so this is, I'm returning a date time from a controller action. This will actually work because what will happen is the date time will be wrapped up inside of a content result, and then the date time will be sent back as a string it will be converted into a string and sent back as text to a browser. So let me show you that. This is called index 4. I'm going to go ahead and run this. And now if I type into my browser, if I type in product/index4, you'll notice that I do get the date and time. It's just being sent back as text to the browser. This has been a very high-level overview of ASP.NET MVC controllers, controller actions, and controller action results. So just remember, all that a controller is just a class. It's a class that gets invoked when you make a request against an ASP.NET MVC application. A controller has one or more controller actions. An action is just a method on that controller class. It's a public method. And a controller action result is a instance of the action result class. It's something returned from a controller action. So 90% of the time, a controller action is going to return a view. A view is the HTML markup and content that you want to send back to the browser. But there are other types of action results as well. You could you could redirect someone to another controller action from one controller action, or you can even do something custom. You could return a Microsoft Excel document if you wanted to.